we were going to lead the pace lap. Motorsports events come in all shapes and sizes, and they really serve three different purposes. One is obviously entertainment. For all car enthusiasts, there are just these bucket list events that at some point in your life you just feel like you've got to get to. It might be the Goodwood Festival of Speed or the Monaco Grand Prix or something like the Indy 500. But they also serve a true business purpose. I mean, manufacturers sell products to race teams, and there's tons of businesses that serve to support different racing efforts and series. But the third is really marketing. And Honda in particular seems to understand the inextricable link between motorsports and new car sales. And certainly there's many manufacturers that have a basis in racing and that translated into new car sales, but Honda has really taken particular ownership of that idea. In fact, they support such a breadth of motorsports operations that if you're an aspiring racing driver, you can literally go from 5 horsepower karts all the way up to Indy cars. Everything in between you could drive and literally never need to spend a lap behind the wheel of a car produced by any other manufacturer. And in noticing that influence of racing success to new car sales, they have continually and constantly invested a lot of money and resources into motorsports. And noticing that influence of this, heralded win on Sunday, sell on Monday mentality, they've also invited who they call influencers to come out and experience Indy racing from behind the scenes with Honda. Now, of course, I don't fancy myself much of an automotive influencer, I guess in the same way that Charles Barkley doesn't think he's a role model, but they felt like it would be beneficial for me to come out there and see what they do and I guess come back here to tell the story. And so I went, along with my editor, to Newton, Iowa, through Des Moines to see the Iowa 300 Indy race, a small oval track, and they had kind of set up an experience for me to go out there to meet some of their team members, to see how the inner workings of IndyCar racing work, and eventually to go for a ride in their 2-seat IndyCar. We show up there, and they have set it up, and it's going to be just this blisteringly hot day in Iowa. There's like a heat wave rolling through. The heat index is supposed to be like 115 degrees, and we're going to be at a track and eventually in a fire suit. So we decided to hold off on going to the track. So it was going to be a night race, and that gave us the chance to sort of walk around and tour this small cornfield town of Newton, Iowa. And when we think about these big, crazy headlining events of every motorsports season, we think we're going to go out and do the Indy 500 and the whole city is going to be alight with whatever that's going on. And that wasn't really the case for this Indy race. It was about 2/3 of the way through the season. There was a lot going on, and the points race was kind of close, but it was really just a very casual thing in the life of this part of Iowa. And I was kind of surprised by that. But as the day went on, I got to see what that really meant, because a little while later we did go over to the track, and there's barely anybody in the grandstands kind of as the afternoon progresses. There's people walking around, but most of the people that are in the infield with us are the actual teams. If this had been a big Formula One race or IMSA race or even a bigger venue IndyCar race, it would have been so busy, so insane. They had some vintage Indy cars out there running. They had people getting laps in the 2-seat cars and the pace cars and all these driving experiences that were going on. But it was a really kind of casual, just hanging out at the track sort of experience. And it showed me that sometimes the bigger the event, the less of a real behind-the-scenes experience you could ever really have, because we got to talk to the drivers, the teams, the people surrounding it, see the enthusiasm from all the people that truly do make a living in and around the IndyCar series. And with Honda in particular, we got to see how their operations work, because IndyCar is interesting because you could campaign the whole season of IndyCar racing for $3 to $5 million per car. You compare that to F1 and it's $100 million plus per car. And the main reason that there's such a difference in how much it actually costs to run is because they're doing so much engineering and support at Honda alongside Chevrolet to lease the motors and really do all of the powertrain engineering themselves as just arrive and drive sort of product. And you standardize the chassis through Dallara, and you get to really see that, look, you're just there to really compare drivers to drivers. Your aero's fixed. They're going to set the cars up for road courses versus ovals, but ultimately it's the chance for them to really see who the best driver in the field is each week. And unlike F1, where you've only got a small percentage of the field that honestly has much of a shot at winning each week, over half the field is truly competitive every IndyCar race. And as the afternoon progressed, I got to spend some good quality time with a guy named Steve Goff. And he is one of the support engineers for Honda through the IndyCar season. And he actually, in his motorsports career, had spent time on McLaren's Formula One team while they were supported by Honda for power plants, and just loves the Honda brand and really gets how what they do at the track each day supports all the new car sales that Honda can achieve. And so that was really, really exciting to kind of get to see and hear from his perspective, kind of a behind the scenes look at what they do to support these teams. And he talked about the different similarities between the engine block that's deployed in these Indy cars and the ones that you can actually just go into your dealership and buy. And the fact that Honda buyers do attribute a lot of their affinity towards the brand, towards what they see in racing. The fact that they believe, as performance car enthusiasts, that Honda actually cares about what happens in motorsport. And so seeing all the different things, because he doesn't just do IndyCar racing, that's where he spends most of his time. But with HPD, Steve is out there pretty much every week of the year at some track supporting some kind of a race car. And it sounds like an awesome life. And it's one of those jobs that you get to see that you never really even imagined. When people ask us at VINwiki pretty much every single day, like, how do I get a job in the car business? They're not being nearly specific enough, because any job that you want probably exists in the context of cars. And when you get to have this kind of angle, this perspective, regardless of whether it's as a fan or someone involved with the manufacturer, or I guess a YouTube influencer, you really get to notice, man, there are so many people that support all this that's going on. And that became critically clear just a couple hours later, because it became time for me to go out on a ride in this two-seat Indy car. And I was, not sure exactly when I was getting ready who was going to be the driver of this. Sometimes they'll just grab somebody from the IndyCar field. Sometimes it'll be Mario Andretti. But for me, it was in fact Arie from The Bachelor. And we were about to get suited up. I got to meet Arie, and he's, historically had been a great IndyCar racer, but now I guess he's more well known for wooing women in mass. But he was very useful to kind of walk me through what the car was, with the similarities that it had to the cars that were out there running, and what we were going to be doing. Because apparently I was going to be kind of introduced alongside the Indy drivers, and we were going to lead the pace lap, do 2 or 3 laps before the field as they kind of got their tires warmed up. As we're just about to go out on this 2-seat ride, it just starts pouring. And so we end up kind of retreating into one of the paddock area tents and just get to hang out with Arie and some of the other team supports and everything else that's going on that day, and really just ride out the storm. And they weren't even sure if they were going to be able to have the race that day, because Arie told me that when it rains that hard and the track gets that soaked, they then have to spend maybe an hour or 2 hours drying it off, because on an oval track, you cannot run with any level of moisture. Because they can't run groove tires, they have to run slicks. There's just not an option. They've got to get it totally dry. So everybody there starts working on how to dry this track off. And it was really amazing. They had these huge fans mounted to some trucks. They were going out there cutting grooves in the track cement to kind of let water out, drilling holes where there was water built up under the surface and letting it spew out. It was really, really crazy, and it was an all hands on deck experience. And eventually this raging storm subsided, and they got the track all dried off and cut up and drilled into, whatever they were having to do. And so it was going to be about time to start the race. And right at that moment, there was this gorgeous rainbow that you could see end to end from the infield. Just one of those things that everything's over, and now it's time to race. And so we go back to the trailer, get all suited up, and we were about, 4 hours later starting the race than they had imagined, which meant it was a real night race, because this night race was going to start at like 6:30. So the sun was still going to be up when everybody finished. These are 90-minute races or so. And so we went out there and got all ready, got in the Indy car and went out to the front of the grid, and really just got to see the excitement build, not just because we were leading up to race time, but because of all the effort that had gone into even just that day. I mean, obviously I'd gotten the chance to see all the effort that went into this throughout the whole season and throughout all the stuff that Honda does to support the series. But this was really just one of those things where the climax of the evening had really culminated due to everyone seeing all the hard work that went into making sure that this race could happen. And so I get strapped in and ready to go, and Arie just blasts off. And he said this thing would do 200 miles an hour. Now, of course, I think the pole was only like 180 some odd miles an hour at this like kind of tighter oval track. But he was really getting after it. It was a whole lot of fun. And I was on this little broadcast for a few seconds on NBC. It was really cool to kind of see from that perspective that even I could fit into an IndyCar chassis. And they've actually had a couple of, 6'4", 6'5" IndyCar racers over the last few years. So it's a really, really interesting model, the way they're set up and how everything works. And even though that can be a little bit of a disadvantage when everything else is kind of being held equal, to have a little bit more weight to carry in an IndyCar chassis. But we made it around a few times, and of course it's always over a lot faster than you ever imagined it would be. But you get back and you climb out and your adrenaline's just pumping because it's such an invigorating experience, and the performance is great. I mean, the things weigh almost nothing and they propel themselves like crazy. So it's a really, really awesome thing. But we took a few more pictures of the car and got to say goodbye to Arie. He might show up here one day and tell some stories. That'd be a whole lot of fun. But, it's just one of those awesome experiences, one of those things as a car guy that honestly you never even think you're going to have the chance to do. But I was humbled, I was honored, and I had an awful lot of fun. And most of all, I learned that beyond anything I'd probably ever even imagined, there's almost no limit to the fun things you can do behind the wheel of a Honda.